Okay, well, let's dive into it. Here's the first thing we can learn from Aquinas. Listen to your opponent to understand what he's arguing for. And here I would just kind of point to two things that I've always found really fascinating with Thomas Aquinas is, well, first of all, kind of getting back to what I said earlier, like we always, it's a cheap trick to misunderstand somebody intentionally, though we might not think we're doing it intentionally, though I think there's something in us that is, because we want to look good, we want to disparage the other person's position. They'll say something, we reinterpret it and restate it in the least favorable light, or argue against it, rather than seeking to, what is it you're actually trying to say? And it's like my kids do this, like something really simple, like my son will say, this has been the best day ever. And his brother will say, really? Like the best day ever? And you're like, oh, for goodness sake, this is tedious. You know what he meant. Or if you didn't, it's your fault, or at least seek to understand what he meant. But I think on Facebook, like how many times, or YouTube, do you see a clarifying comment? And whenever you do, I'm always like, good for you, but it's very rare that you see someone saying, hey, when you said this, did you mean this or this? And then you can kind of attack or make an argument, but you don't often see it. But one of the things Aquinas does really well is he steel man, as opposed to straw mans, his opponent's positions. And finally, he seems to formulate his opponent's positions in syllogisms, which is also really interesting to me. Right, so here he is, he's trying to think of arguments against his position, and he doesn't strawman them, right? He doesn't, like when arguing for atheism, he doesn't say, atheists don't want to believe in God because they want to sin. It's like, no, I don't think that's necessarily what they're arguing for. That may be the case, but that's definitely not the strongest argument. But then when he states their objection, he'll do it syllogistically. And for those who are watching, a syllogism is like two premises and a conclusion in a deductive form. And what's great about that is sometimes it's really difficult to kind of understand what your opponent's saying. It's almost like if you were to throw a bunch of stuff on the floor and you're like, okay, what am I dealing with here? And it can be overwhelming, but when you put it into a syllogistic form, it's like, someone might say something, it might be emotionally persuasive. And you go, okay, it sounds like you're saying, premise one, this, premise two, this, therefore, this. Is that what you're saying? And then it's like a lot easier to examine it and to see the merits and flaws in it. And I've always appreciated that about Aquinas. But regarding this first point, what do you think, listening to your opponent?
Yeah, I think that what comes through is that St. Thomas is about the business of discovering the truth. So for him, the thought of vanquishing his foes doesn't so much enter into his mind unless he finds that those advancing the arguments are doing so in bad faith. So he always assumes good faith. He always assumes that the other individual is in pursuit of a common truth. And if that's the case, then he can use what they put forward as fodder for, or as potential insight in the discovery of the truth. So he has this habit, especially with Christians, of reverential exposition, where whenever he reads them, he tries to interpret their words in such a way that it conduces to the discovery of the truth. So he's never going to say like, Augustine said this thing, but fool,
please.
Yeah, girl, please. No, he's gonna show a way by which subsequent resources in the tradition shed light on what he has said and tease out the implications thereof and show it ultimately to be true. So I think that's the ultimate point. He's doing dialectic, right? So he's using these different opinions as a way by which to kind of triangulate towards the truth, as a way by which to sift different insights and show them by comparison to maybe contrary opinions, so as to tease out ultimately what will help us discover the Lord and look more clearly upon reality. So yeah, it's just he's just got a very fair and disciplined temper of mind to be able to see what is rather than simply who said.
Yeah, I like what you said there, that he assumes good faith in the other person unless it becomes apparent that they're not arguing. And I think we don't, just that kind of example I gave earlier when you say like you only believe because, it's almost like whenever you say that, you're about to commit the genetic fallacy, first of all. But then also, it's like you're assuming bad faith or you're psychologizing. Mm-hmm. So when you say of an atheist, you just want there to be no God so that you can do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, you're assuming bad faith. You're assuming that this person isn't genuinely interested in the truth. And you're also assuming their psychological state, which presumably you don't actually have access to. Yeah. So at the very least, you're not off to a good start, and this argument together is probably not going to go anywhere useful.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you go.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, like, think about the Gospels. Where in the Gospels do you hear about what Jesus thought? You don't.
Huh.
Yeah, you just get publicly verifiable acts, and then those publicly verifiable acts impinge upon our lives. And maybe it's like a helpful exercise to think meditatively or an image-driven way about what he might have thought, but, we're in the business of dealing with what people
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, the gospel writers may not have talked about Christ's thoughts, but Christ was the only one who could, infallibly understand other people's thoughts and then respond to them even without them saying things. We see that in the Gospels.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But unless we've been given that gift.
Thank you for watching this clip. You can click here to watch the full episode. And I want to say a big thanks to our sponsors and to our amazing patrons for making all of this possible. Please do us a favor before you go. Click that subscribe button and then the bell. And that way YouTube will be forced to let you know every time we put out a new episode.